Welcome to In the Clutch. I am your host, Draft Raw. Unfortunately, as I stated in a previous video for the running backs, because of the coronavirus that is going around, Maniac Ray will not be in this video. It happens. But the show must go on. And in this video, we're going to talk about the top tight end prospects within the 2020 draft. Now, in a previous video, I stated, I believe it was the scouting combine video, I talked about the tight end prospects going into the combine. And I stated how there was no true first round type of tight end, maybe not even a true second round type of tight end. This was stuff that I was hearing before I actually put a lot more of my study and work into the tight ends. As I did that, I felt a little bit different about the tight ends. I will say this. There may not be a true first round tight end within this draft class, but you're definitely got a second round tight end. And I wouldn't be surprised if a guy slips into the first round, just because I believe there are some pretty solid athletic type of tight ends that give you a whole different dynamic, especially as a receiving threat within this draft. So the first guy that I'm going to start off with is Hunter Bryant. And I believe he played at Washington. If I look at my notes here, Hunter Bryant plays like a receiver. He's a willing blocker, even if he's not great, but he is definitely better than what you think. Now, going back to what I said earlier is when I said play like a receiver. This is a guy that, not to say had speed like a receiver, but had movement skills like a receiver. This is a type of player that you could put in a slot and you could put a one-on-one with a corner and he will be able to get open because of the natural quickness that he had as a route runner. And this is a guy that I feel as though could be that tight end that sneaks into the first round because of that special offensive talent that he would give to a certain NFL team that ever drafts him. Next on the list, we're going to talk about the guy that a lot of scouts, or let me say media scouts, have been praising as the best tight end. And that is Cole Kmet from Notre Dame. He needs to improve as a blocker, but I would say as I was watching the tape, he wasn't bad at it. He just needs improvement, just like Hunter Bryant. And honestly, you're going to see a recurring theme of me saying improve as a blocker, or a guy just needs to get better at blocking. And that's why you would say there's no true first round tight end. He's a tough physical type of player. He's hard to bring down. He has really good hands. And the one biggest thing that I loved about his tape was he reminded me of Rob Gronkowski, who we all know is not one, but he was one of the best tight ends within the NFL. Unfortunately, he retired this past season and whatever and everything that happened, but we may be getting the second coming of a Gronk. Now, I don't like comparing players to draft prospects. I hate it. So I don't do this often, but as I was watching him, his movement skills, the way he played, the way he broke tackles remind me so much of Rob Gronkowski. Now, as we move along here, we're going to talk about Adam Trotman, who went to Dayton, I believe. Adam Trotman is a solid blocker, solid, not great. Needs to improve his route running consistency. A lot of times on tape, he wasn't the best route runner. He didn't get open as consistently as I wanted him to, and he wasn't playing against great competition, so you kind of wonder how good of a route runner he is. But he's a guy that showed up at the Senior Bowl and showed that he could play in this league with some top prospects. So it's one of those things where it's the consistency of it. Sometimes you can see that great the hip flexion and the arm movement and the feet and the quickness to be able to get open and the way he controls his body. And then other times you see him and it's just sloppy and it's not consistent like you wanted it to be. He's a big mismatch type of player. And he's surprisingly faster than what you think. I'm not sure about what he ran in the 40-yard dash. I could really care not that much about what he did run. But I will say that on the football field, he's definitely faster than what people think he would be. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest reasons why he was able to show out at the Senior Bowl. But being as that he played at Dayton, a very, very small school, and that he did surprise a lot of draft scouts out there, I'm not surprised that he is faster than, he should be able to dominate, and he is faster than what people may think. Next on the list is a guy that was looked at as being the top tight end prospect when the draft process started back in August, and that is Albert O. from, and I can't pronounce his last name, but Albert O. from Missouri. He's a receiving tight end. He needs more strength and effort in his blocks, but he's not bad. He's actually not as bad as what people may say he is, but he definitely needs to put a little bit more effort if he wants to be a top tight end in this league and actually wants to stay on the field. He has really, really good hands. I think that out of all of the tight ends in this draft class, he probably has the best hands. And that's going to be huge for him as a receiving tight end. Now, he made big news at the Combine because he did run the fastest time out of all the tight ends in a time that, you know, is really comparable to receivers for being a 250-pound tight end. But that was probably the biggest reason why he was considered to being the top tight end when the draft process started back in August. But we look at him now, and maybe he's not so, but I will say this, he could definitely be a surprise as a tight end being drafted from a team in the NFL. Next, we're going to talk about Bryson Hopkins. I believe this is a guy that played at Vanderbilt. Bryson Hopkins is a fast reception type of tight end. That's really what I got from him. He's not much of a blocker. He's kind of like a glorified type of receiver. And I'm not even sure if he played at Vanderbilt. I could be wrong about that. I know that there was guys that I can get mixed up because of certain colors of their uniforms and stuff like that. But knowing his name, if you're watching this, just type in his name, you'll know what I'm talking about. He was just a fast receiving tight end. Nothing crazy. He's not one of those guys that I will put up there as possibly sneaking into the first round. It would literally only be Hunter Bryant, Cole Kmet, or Albert O that could really sneak into it. But Bryce Hopkins is a guy that, like I said, he's got speed, and that's big for tight ends, and that could be a mismatch problem for linebackers and safeties. Then Thaddeus Moss is the next tight end we're going to talk about, the LSU tight end. He didn't really show any route running skills, and he just seemed kind of average to me. There was nothing that he did that popped, but he definitely could be a solid tight end within this league. Knowing that he's the son of Randy Moss, I was expecting bigger things, and I wasn't going into it expecting bigger than what I actually saw in terms of like, I just had high expectations for it. I didn't have the greatest high expectations, but I wanted to see if this player was better than what we thought. And being as though maybe I had to deal with the offense, maybe I had to deal with Joe Burrow throwing to his top receivers like Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. It's probably the biggest reason why he didn't have a bigger role. But when it came down to it, I didn't see him in a bigger role, period, because maybe he just can't do the certain things that other tight ends can do. Next on the list is Harrison Bryant. We had a Hunter Bryant, and now we have Harrison Bryant. Harrison Bryant is a good route runner. He has okay hands. He's not an inline tight end. Just like the other Bryant, he's more of a guy that you will put out in the slot. But with Hunter Bryant, I could put on inline. With Harrison Bryant, no inline. He needs to improve his blocking. Once again, another receiving type of tight end that needs to improve on becoming a blocker within the NFL. That's the only way how most of these tight ends are going to get on the field is they have to improve their blocking. Now, if they are just an amazing receiving type of threat tight end, they can get on the field. But when it comes down to it, you have to become a blocker because that's what most offenses entail a tight end to do. Next on the list is Colby Parkinson. I believe he played at Stanford. can be a wide receiver with movement skills. He kind of moves a little bit like Hunter Bryant. He has size and skills, but he does have size and skills of a traditional tight end. I feel as though even though he kind of moves like a wide receiver, especially when he gets the ball in his hands and stuff like that, he still is a traditional tight end that you can put his hand in the dirt and he'll be able to block. He was a better blocker. Like most of these guys, he was a better blocker than what you would think he would be, but he definitely still played a very traditional role of a tight end, which I didn't see as much when I watched tape on the rest of these tight ends that are in this draft. Then we're going to go to Jarrett Pickney. This may be the player that's from Vanderbilt. Like I said, I wasn't sure. A lot of these guys, the colors are the same. It was a lot of guys watching. But anyway, Jarrett Pickney is a traditional tight end. He's not really fast, but he reminds me a little of George Kittle. I hate making player comparisons, but when I see a guy and I'm watching him and it just reminds me of that player so much, I have to at least say it. Because to give people a kind of a view of what I'm seeing and what these players could be when they enter into the NFL. Jarrett Pickney is a guy that very well could be one of the better tight ends, not just in this draft class, but in the league if he is that George Kittle type. Not saying he's going to be George Kittle, but the skill sets are there. The only thing is that he doesn't have that tremendous speed that George has. But once again, that's what I see on tape. And last but not least, we're going to talk about another LSU tight end, and that is Sullivan. He, to me, has the biggest potential out of all of the tight ends in this draft. He didn't do much at LSU. But the biggest thing about Sullivan is that he has underrated speed, he has underrated hands, he has underrated route running skills, he's an underrated blocker. He's underrated in everything that he does because he didn't do it a lot. He's one of those guys that he wasn't out on the field that much, but when he was, I saw something that was better than what maybe the coaches saw. So maybe this is a guy that could get drafted into a camp, into a team, or if he goes undrafted, brought into a camp, and he can show a skill set that someone can work around, and maybe possibly potentially be another Antonio Gates type of tight end, a guy that comes in that's an undrafted guy, nobody really knows much about him, and really be able to star within the NFL, becoming one of the best to ever do it. I'm not saying this kid will, but he does have potential and a skill set to be able to become one of the best tight ends within the NFL. Anyway, that was the last tight end I wanted to talk about. I thank everybody for watching. Like I said, unfortunately, Maniac Ray is not here, but he should be back within the next 2 episodes that we will do. So please comment, please like, and please subscribe to Draft Raw. Once again, this is In the Clutch. Goodbye.
Thanks for tuning into the show In the Clutch. You can find us on YouTube at Draft Raw. Please sign in and subscribe. Also on Uncut Sports on Facebook. You can also catch us at Ravens Nation as well. And Draft Raw, what's that page you subscribe to?
Please subscribe to TV Free Baltimore. You can find them on Facebook, Twitter, and of course, YouTube. And if you want to see more of me, you can subscribe to Draftrawthentic on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
And the opening song is called Bring the Pain. That's by the artist Renard, streaming on all major platforms, specifically Spotify. We'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.